Hi everyone, our guest today is Toby Winson. Toby is a journalist for ITV News and a recovery blogger. We had an absolutely fascinating conversation. If you enjoyed, please make sure you like and subscribe. And without further ado, please welcome today's guest, Toby Winson.
Yeah, no worries. So, as Jack said, I'm now a journalist with ITV Regional News for ITV Meridian, but I'm also a recovering alcoholic. I'm nearly 5 years sober now. I had liver disease at 25 years old, alcoholism, which should have killed me. There's been numerous times when I should have died. And now I've ended up working for ITV News somehow. Not quite sure how that's happened, but um, so my story began when I was a teenager. I started drinking at 13, and I loved it from day one. I preferred being drunk than being sober. That was the thing with me. There was no real trauma. There's no real history of alcoholism in my family. With me, it was just I loved it. I've got an addictive personality, and I preferred how feeling drunk felt right from that young age. Up until about, I always drank more than all my friends, and I was known for it, and I liked the fact I was known for it, and it was always vodka growing up. But it wasn't until I was 18, 19 that I started drinking every single evening. I started drinking at least one bottle of vodka every single evening after work, or I was at uni as well. I was at uni and I was working, and I was drinking a bottle every night. And I thought it was okay because I was young.
Right.
I thought it's normal. I thought most people are doing this, and it slowly became the only thing that I cared about was that bottle of vodka in the evening. Before I knew it, I remember, I kind of remember, I felt so rough one morning. I thought, do you know what? I enjoy being drunk so much, it'll get rid of the hangover. I'm just going to drink in the morning. So I drank a bottle of vodka in the morning. It was great. And I thought, right, I won't do that again. And then the next day I did it again. And the next day, and the next day. And then before I knew it, I was a 24/7 drinker. At my worst, I was drinking 1.5 liters of vodka a day. Now, I somehow managed to finish uni. In my last year of uni, I stopped drinking. I went cold turkey, which at the time I didn't realise was really dangerous. Alcohol is actually the most dangerous drug to go cold turkey on.
Right.
So I went cold turkey, and I ended up having severe hallucinations. I ended up running towards traffic on a dual carriageway, and I ended up in the end. I ended up in hospital for 5 days, and the nurses told my mum and dad said to the nurses, "When's he going to snap out of these hallucinations? What's caused this?" And I told them how much I've been drinking, that I've just stopped. And one of the forms of alcohol withdrawal, severe alcohol withdrawal, is hallucinations. I've also had seizures from stopping drinking, just going cold turkey. So that's one thing I've learned on the way, is that alcohol is it's a nasty drug.
Yeah.
In terms of if you've been drinking for a long period, just stopping, going cold turkey, is really dangerous. So from I managed to finish uni somehow and got a 2-1. I don't know how, but after uni it just got worse and worse. I ended up in rehab at 23. I was the second youngest person to ever be in the rehab I was in.
Right.
I was lucky to get funding for rehab from the council, because it's extremely expensive. I went to rehab. I came out. I relapsed. The next 2 years, my drinking got worse. I lost my job. I lost my family. I was in a little flat, and I was just my whole life revolved around getting that next drink. I'd make sure there was drink next to my bed in the morning when I went to sleep. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning. I'd have to make myself sick first thing, otherwise I wouldn't be able to hold the alcohol down. And I needed to get the alcohol in me to stop the shakes, because the shakes were a sign that a seizure was coming. I've been in hospital. During that period I was in hospital, I must have been detoxed 30 times in hospital. I ended up back in rehab in 2000, when I was 25, in 2015. And that was after I was diagnosed with liver disease. And I walked past the mirror in my flat one day after I'd managed to get some alcohol in my system. And I had to double take, because the whites in my eyes, they weren't white anymore, they'd gone yellow. Now, but at this point, all my skin was jaundiced. I was yellow. I was bright yellow. But because it had happened over the time, I hadn't noticed. But the eyes, when I look back, and all of the whites were completely yellow, that sent a shiver up my spine. And that was the point that I spent the rest of the day thinking about what I'm going to do. Eventually, I rang an ambulance. They took me to my local hospital, and within 3 days, they rushed me to London. and I didn't get better for 2 weeks, and it looked like I was going to die, to be honest.
Yeah.
At that point, I didn't really care. Alcoholism had just knocked the life out of me. So I went back to rehab. This is after liver disease. It took me another year of drinking. Somehow I survived before I finally managed to stop and stay stopped. And a lot of that was down to talking honestly about what was going on in my head. And if I had a craving, instead of trying to deal with it myself, tell someone. And that's what made the big difference with me, along with writing my blog.
Yeah.
The next thing that happened, so 2 years into recovery, 2.5 years into recovery, the last thing that was, like, I was sober for a good stint of time, but the thing that was really, really annoying me and getting me down and was a danger of me relapsing was I was beating myself up for having lost 7 years of my adult life to alcoholism, just wasting most of my 20s through drinking.
Yeah.
And I thought I needed to do something to make that time worthwhile. So that's when I started writing the blog about my recovery, about mistakes I made, about how I stay sober now. And just thinking, if one person stops drinking through or doesn't go down the road I went down by reading what I'm writing, it makes those years worth something and I can move on. And it did that. And as well as that, it's somehow started this journey that I'm now on in journalism, and it's just sort of snowballed.
Yeah.
From writing the blog, my mum, who I have to tell you this, my family are amazing, by the way. I'm lucky. I've got a really supportive family, and they never gave up on me, although they were close, I think, on a few occasions. But at one point, when my mum was, I like I said to you, just going cold turkey on alcohol when you're dependent on it is very, very dangerous and can kill you. My mum at one point, while I was waiting to get into a detox centre, she had to, the doctor basically said to her, like, he can't stop drinking, it's too dangerous. So my mum had to ration me vodka for I think about 2 weeks while I waited to get into a detox place. My mum had to give me the thing that was killing me, which like, as a parent, like, I'm not a parent, but I can't imagine how difficult that been for her, which is why I spend most of my time now trying to make it up to my family. But it's the kind of thing it does to families. It rips them apart, and it actually, alcohol ends up hurting the family of the addict. Well, all addictions, they hurt the family and the loved ones of the addict more than they actually hurt the addict, because the addict's out of his head. Yeah. The addict's most of the time is drunk or in hospital or has given up hope and everything. But the family, they just feel helpless. Hopeless, like they can't do anything. Like, my dad's locked me in a house before. He's taken away all my clothes. This is when I was a lot younger. He took all my clothes away, locked all the doors, the windows, and everything to stop me going out and getting a drink. I still got out. I went out in a pair of pajama bottoms and loafers, down to the shop and got a drink because I needed that drink. Yeah. It's what addiction is. Anyway, back to where my story was going. So I started writing a blog, and then my parents had obviously read my blog and realised that I was half decent at writing, and I knew I was working as a labourer at the time, just a builder's labourer, and I knew I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. And my mum saw an advert on TV, on ITV News actually, for a competition called Breaking Into News, which is run by a charity called Media Trust, and it was a journalism competition to find broadcast journalists from diverse backgrounds. My dad's a bricklayer, so I'm from a working class family, and my mum said you should enter that, and for some reason I pondered on it for a while, and in the last day I had an idea. I knew basically for the competition you had to have an idea for a news story in your local area. That's how you applied. Yeah. You gave them loads of information about yourself and your idea for a story. So I told them about my blog, my story, and my idea was about the lack of alcohol education in schools. Well, there was when I was in school anyway, and how this needs to be highlighted. So I entered on the last day you could enter, and I was picked as one of 10 finalists, one for each ITV region. And I was paired with an ITV journalist, Chloe Oliver, and between us and Sarah Saunders, another journalist, and a camera operator, I set up the whole story. I found a school that I could go into. I found a teacher who would speak to me. I set up the whole thing. They gave me a camera person and a journalist to help me on the day. We went to the school. We filmed the whole thing. I took a PSHE class about addiction, and then I interviewed some students. I interviewed the deputy head teacher.
Yeah.
And basically, they all said there wasn't enough alcoholism education in school, so it sort of backed up my point, which was great. And then the idea of the competition was the 10 finalists, if the pieces that they made were good enough, they'd be aired on the news, and mine was aired, which was amazing. And then you had to present your what you'd made to a panel of judges. One of them became my boss a little bit down the line. So we were all supposed to go to Leeds to present what we had made to the judges, and the other 9 got to Leeds. I didn't, because I live in Kent, and I got to King's Cross and all the trains to Leeds had been cancelled. So I had to come back to Kent on the train, which, Jack, you'll know, it's like, to where I am in Kent is like an hour and a half. Get home and then do my presentation on Zoom. But I ended up winning the competition, which was amazing. And like I said, one of the judges was Margaret Elmsley, she's not anymore, the head of news at ITV Calendar in Leeds. Once I won the competition, I just thought, look, I'm not going to let this opportunity slip now. This is a competition to find broadcast journalists. I've just won the competition. They have to give me a chance. Because the overall prize was £400 worth of journalist equipment and basically kudos kind of thing, and the connections you made on the way. But then it was up to you to use that. Yeah. So like I said, I was working as a labourer. I booked time off work, and I asked them if I could do work experience at ITV Meridian in Kent, in the southeast, and ITV Calendar in Leeds. They both said yes. I booked hotels in Leeds, travelled up there, paid for it all myself through the labouring job I've been doing, and luckily I was self-employed, so I could take the time off. And I did the work experience. I got stuck in. I just got involved. I probably made an idiot out of myself, to be honest, because I had no qualification in journalism whatsoever. But if I heard them talking about something, I'd get involved and start looking for case studies or locations on the internet while I was there, and just really tried to make them remember me. Asked as many questions as I could, and just got stuck in. And then at the end of it, I said, "What's next? What do I need to do now?" So I did a week at Meridian, a week at Calendar in Leeds. Calendar asked me back for another 2 weeks. And this time they paid for my hotel and travel. And then the election came along, and they needed someone to phone bash for the election. And because I'd been getting stuck in, they asked me and gave me a 2-month contract. And I couldn't believe it, to be honest. Like, this labourer, recovering alcoholic, who like a few years ago was on his deathbed, like no one, do you know what I mean? Like, it's insane.
I could tell even now that you know, it's like you feel that it sort of beggars belief that you're in the situation that you're in. Is it? Do you still have those moments where you kind of?
Oh yeah, all the time. What's it called? Oh God, see what I mean? I can't even remember what it's called.
It just feels
Imposter
like
syndrome.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But I think everyone in a newsroom gets that, unless you've been there for years and years. I think everyone feels like, especially when you step into a new role.
Yeah.
Like we've had a meeting about it, imposter syndrome, at work.
Really?
Because it's such a, like, it feels prestigious, if you know what I mean.
Of course, yeah.
And although it's not, it's just like you can't help but thinking. It gets better as time goes on. Like, now I'm a lot more confident, but I still have moments when I'm like, and also no one really sounds like me in the newsroom, because I've spent like 5 years working on a building site. My dad's a Cockney, and it's nice because people remember me, if you know what I mean.
Well, it's why I think it's so important. Like you were saying, the media trust were looking for people with diverse backgrounds. It's why it's so important that you've got groups like that are looking for people like that wouldn't ordinarily find themselves in a newsroom or wouldn't ordinarily be chosen for that kind of role, because you become, and I think this about you, like, you become a role model. There's no doubt about it at all. I think you become a role model for people that are from backgrounds, you know, working class backgrounds like you are, like I am, who want to go into the media industry, that they can look up to and say, well, you know, if Toby can do it, then there's no reason that I can do it, right?
No, you're right. It's weird saying it. Yeah, You're right. And the media trust are amazing. I mean, they really are brilliant. I'm on another one of their schemes at the moment, called the Screen Skills Mentoring Scheme, and basically they partnered me. I think there's about 80 of us, 40 really experienced people in the television industry, and 40 people who are either looking for entry jobs or not very experienced. Now, obviously, I'm one of the not very experienced ones, and I've been partnered with a TV producer, and she's amazing, and she's teaching me how to make treatments, which are a treatment is what you need to present an idea for a documentary to a commissioner. I didn't even know what a treatment was before I started this scheme. And she's teaching me, and I'm working on a documentary idea now that hopefully I'm going to present to a commissioner. But that's all through media trust, and it's just for people. It's for young people, mainly people from diverse backgrounds, and they've been brilliant ever since. To be honest, they're always asking me to get involved in other stuff. I've actually just written a blog post about just saying yes to opportunities, no matter how big or small you think they are. Because you never know where they're going to lead. And I think I've developed the "you've got nothing to lose" attitude through my journey through alcoholism, because I've come so close to death that what have I got to lose now, if you know what I mean. But,
sorry, I just wanted to sort of kind of take a step back, if we may. And first of all, I just want to say congratulations on your sobriety as well. I think, and everybody can tell it's an incredible achievement. You say you started at 13. It's obviously quite a young age to start drinking. I think, looking back, probably went to my first party when I was about 14, had a drink away from parents for the first time about the same age. How common do you think it is, especially in this country, to start drinking at that age?
It's very common. Like my first drinks were sneaking down and mixing all sorts of stuff from my parents, like the bottles they had. Like I'd have a friend stay over, and we'd go downstairs and we'd just get a glass and just put everything we could find in it, mix it up, and then pretend to be drunk. And then we managed to start. And then I had one friend whose parents used to get us the drink, but like really weak drink, thinking it's more responsible to actually give their children like a 12, like 3 of them, like a 12 crate of WKDs or something, and letting them go and do it behind your back, and God knows what they're drinking. Whether or not that's right or wrong, it's debatable, isn't it? But it's very common. I mean, it's drink alcohol is a part of society. If alcohol was invented now, in my opinion, it'd be a class A drug. It's highly addictive. It's very bad for your health. Can you imagine if alcohol was not a thing and it just came on the scene now, this new stuff that people drink, and it changes their behaviour, and it would be a drug. It would 100% be a class. It destroys so many lives. It's so addictive, but it's part of society, and it'll never change.
How important do you think it is? I mean, I'm sure I can sort of imagine what your answer is going to be to this, but how important is it that from that young age we educate young people about alcohol in a more productive way than we do now? Because if I look back on my time in school and my time in sort of learning about that stuff in PSHE or science or whatever, it's oftentimes taught in an incredibly sort of fear-mongering way that doesn't necessarily lead to any sort of productive conversations. It's not spoken about openly, and the time that it is taught is very limited. So it might be, it might come up 2 or 3 times in the time that you're at secondary school, and it becomes, like you say, it underpins so much of society. How important is it that we look at different ways of educating people about alcohol and sort of more widely addiction?
But I think addiction should be a subject. I think because we have subjects like alcohol and drugs they were taught, and I'm pretty sure they still are taught in PSHE. It's called something else now, isn't it? But it was PSHE when I was at school.
Yeah, me too.
The subject. It's definitely called something else now, because they told me when I did my piece for Breaking Into News. But addiction should be a subject on its own, even if it's just taught once every fortnight for an hour.
Yeah.
And because you think you have alcohol, you have drugs, you have gambling, you have social media, you have gaming, all of these things now that are in society that are so accessible to people. that are all highly addictive, and they're advertised left, right, and centre as well.
Yeah.
It especially off the back of coronavirus, I can just see a pandemic of addiction coming, to be honest. And if you tackle it, like, I go into schools and I talk to kids about, off the back of breaking into news, I've started going into school and I talk to kids about addiction and my story, because I hope that we all have that one or two things that, guests that came into our school, and you remember something about it, and it sticks in your head because you're that age, and you just, and I hope that I can be that to some. That's why I do it, because I hope I can be like that to someone who could go on and have addiction problems. But yeah, tackling it in schools is obviously the best way. People are still learning, and certain things stick, don't they, when you're that age?
Yeah, for sure.
But if you're just brushing over it, and because it's part of society, I mean, on top of that, you think how empty, not empty, but the prisons as well.
Yeah.
How many crimes are committed when someone's under the influence?
Yeah. It's a high proportion, I imagine.
Exactly. It's, but it's, you'd never, there'll never be a day when alcohol becomes illegal. And to be honest, I'm not calling for that.
Yeah, yeah.
What I am calling for is, I think the companies that produce alcohol should be the ones that pay some of the treatment, for some of the treatment.
Yeah.
Because in the last 8 years, I think something like 50% of the rehabs in this country have shut down because of a lack of funding.
That's scary.
And cuts to alcohol services in general just keep happening. Even though throughout this pandemic, calls to helplines have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why I think we're heading towards a pandemic of it.
Do you think that rehab should be encompassed in the NHS then? Because it boggles my mind that it isn't. The fact that it isn't available, the fact that some people can't access rehab because of the background that they're from, because of the financial situation that they're in, to me makes no sense. It's surely a health issue, not an issue that you can get proper treatment for it if you're available, if the finances are right. I would have thought that should be the way that we should be looking at it.
I think it's a very difficult change to make to the NHS without upsetting a lot of people.
Just because of the cost.
What I mean? Well, yeah, it's very expensive. Basically, the way it works, I'm sure if it still works the same way as it worked when I got funding, you have to get a caseworker at a local alcohol service, which is funded by the government. They build you a case and they present it to a panel who decide whether or not you get a chunk of their allocated money for rehabs.
Right.
I was very lucky, I think, because I was young, and my story was like I was basically going to die. I got funding twice to go to rehab, but that was before and during the beginning of the major cuts. In terms of, you could argue we treat people who have illnesses through smoking, which is an addiction, isn't it? We treat people for everything else.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah, it's a tough question, because I don't know because you have to put it into context. Is it going to take money away from other parts of the NHS? There should definitely be more money just allocated to alcohol and drug and addiction services.
Yeah.
Rather than putting the burden on the NHS, I think there should be a separate allocation, and there should be more of it to tackle addiction head on and fund schools to teach about addiction more.
Yeah, because it's not a problem that's going away, is it? It's a problem that continues to exacerbate, and with the pandemic as well, who knows to what extent the lockdown's going to impact on people's drinking. I know that I have probably drunk in a strange way, maybe not as much but more regularly, so I'll have a beer with dinner or whatever. There's probably plenty of people who are in a similar situation and who, through boredom or what have you, I don't know, all of the causes have begun to drink more. Who knows what impact that's having on people's health. So why it wouldn't be wrapped up in that, or why more funds wouldn't be allocated, I don't know. Similarly to mental health, I know this is something that you've sort of touched on in previous segments, and I watched the documentary the piece that you made for ITV, and seems to me that underlying in this is sort of both, you spoke about your support network, but also about how mental health is impacted through different kinds of addiction. Do you think that that's the way that we should be looking at it? You know, there's a lot of talk about mental health awareness. Do you think that recovery and addiction should be wrapped up in those conversations too?
Yeah, they're all linked. They're all linked. They come hand in hand. Addiction is a mental health issue. I mean, in my mind, it's I was born with a addicted personality, and nothing is ever enough for me. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And my mental health was severely affected by when I stopped drinking. It took me 2 years to get my head straight, because I've been blocking out so many emotions for so long with alcohol. So they all hit me like a ton of bricks when I got like 2 or 3 months sober under my belt. All of a sudden, all this anxiety, all this guilt, all this resentment, everything just hit me, just constantly, like tidal waves. And I developed a thing for the first year and a half of my recovery. Every single night, I had a wooden cabinet bedside table thing, and I would touch that and go through everything in my head that I didn't want to happen, because that was part of my recovery. But it was insane. If I messed it up in my head, what I was saying, I'd start again, take my finger off it, start again. Every single night I was doing that, and they're all linked. And a lot of people do end up turning to drink and drugs because of their mental health and levels with it. So that's another thing that I think schools are getting better with teaching about mental health and things like that. Yeah. I think there was a change in the syllabus. You'd have to check that, but when I did my Breaking Into News piece, I'm pretty sure they said that was something that was getting changed, but nothing specifically talking about addiction. But yeah, if you could wrap them both up together in one subject and teach it more frequently, I think that would have a big effect.
Yeah, you mentioned you were lucky to have a really supportive family as well. Do you think that if that support network wasn't there, or if people don't have a support network, obviously it's far more difficult to deal with those decisions. Do you think that was part of the reason why you were able to eventually seek recovery, because you had that sort of supportive network around you?
Yeah, I think so. It's impossible to say whether or not I would have died or recovered without them. It's impossible to say, but they definitely helped, and I think it would have been a lot harder without them.
Yeah.
And I really feel for people who have no one to turn. Well, everyone's got someone to turn to, but the thing about addiction is you're battling. One side of your head is the addicted side, and the other side is you. And you're battling that all the time, and that's telling you not to tell anyone about your addiction, not to ask for help. And it's a huge battle. If you've got family, it's hard to hide from them what's going on.
Yeah.
But if you haven't, reaching out is one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah. And what would you say, just to wrap up, I guess, where can people find out more about your work? Where can people go to read your blog? And what would your message be to anybody that's struggling with any form of addiction, especially at the moment during the pandemic?
If you're struggling in any way, shape or form with your mental health or with addiction or with both, you need to tell someone. You need to reach out and tell someone. It's literally like taking a weight off your back, and it puts things into perspective, and it allows you to make the next step in reaching out to someone who can help you even more. Like, get in touch. There's so many services out there now. If you just Google whatever the trouble is you're having, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or mental health, just Google what your issue is, and there'll be numbers to call and reach out to someone, because talking about it helps so much. Honestly, for a long time, I kept it, what was going on, what was truly going on in my head, I kept it to myself, and I didn't talk honestly, and I just told lies about how I was when the reality was I was crumbling inside. You have to tell someone what's going on, and you have to tell them honestly what's going on. That's the first major step to recovery. Yeah. That's my best bit of advice, my best nugget. If you want to check out my blog, you find it at www.recoveryboy.blog.
Perfect. Toby, thank you so much for joining me. It's an absolute honour to chat with you, and I really appreciate your time. Everybody, make sure you go and check out Toby's work and tune into ITV Meridian as well. Thanks, mate. I really appreciate it. Cheers.